Well, welcome to another episode Out of the Blank podcast. I'm with Neil. Are you related to the famous Neil Armstrong?
No, oddly enough, first name similarities don't tend to reflect a relation blood-wise. Weird how
I'll,
that works.
I have to Google that because I don't know if that's true. But Neil, why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself, man?
Okay, so hi, Neil Hedley. I don't know. I don't even know where to start. Let's see. 40 plus years radio and television guy, now doing more podcasts than I have time to do, starting more projects than I have time to do, writing a book, yada, yada, yada. Addicted to Stanley Tucci's new series on CNN, except that I'm sitting eating cold pizza while I'm watching it. So I feel like I'm probably missing the point.
That's the way life was intended.
Right? I mean, he's touring around Italy. He's eating all this fabulous food. Last night's episode was like rice and polenta. Sorry if I'm dating us for when we sat down for this chat. But he's doing like rice and polenta in these beautiful restaurants all over Italy. And I'm sitting there looking at my pizza box and I'm going, okay, well, I got some ground to make up, I think, a little bit.
I find pure happiness in the fact that I can eat a nice can of tuna and watch amazing people cook amazing items that I will never have the time or patience to be able to do.
Wait, right? Not right out of the can.
Yeah, right out of the can, dude. With a nice saltine, you stick it in there. That's dude. All right. So I was doing an experiment for like a while recently. Is I'm consuming under 400 calories a day. So I try to figure out.
Why?
I don't just for fun. I don't know, testing to see how much you actually need to how much people actually choose to need. And then I
Sure.
realized you need a hell of a lot less than you think you do.
Yep. And I've heard people say that. I mean, I'm kind of doing the same kind of an experiment myself, right? The way that you and I encountered each other was through my podcast, which is I never actually intended to be a podcaster. I was writing a book. And so while I'm writing the book, I'm interviewing a million people. And because I want to quote them properly for the book, I thought, okay, well, I got to record these interviews. And then I thought, well, wait a minute, if I'm recording the interviews, I might as well take the recordings and put them out to the world because there's like 5% of the conversation with these people that are actually going to make it into the book. The other 95% is probably interesting. So let's put those out there as podcast episodes. But my experiment was to kind of turn myself into a lab rat because I've had problems with insomnia since about the age of, I think, 6.
Same here.
Yeah. And so I decided I was going to do something about it because I started reading all the scary stories about, cognitive decline and dementia and all these different things. And I thought, okay, let's fix that so that my now 2.5-year-old, when it's time for her grad or her wedding or whatever, I get to participate in some kind of meaningful way, And so I thought rather than just learn about sleep, what I'm going to do, I'm going to interview all these researchers and scientists from all over the world, pick their brains, learn from the leading players in the world about what sleep is and how it even works. But then let's take it a step further than that and let's talk to people who have sleep challenges that are kind of baked into their everyday experience. So how do you fall asleep if you're on the International Space Station? How do you fall asleep if you're playing in the Super Bowl tomorrow? How do you fall asleep the night before? How do you fall asleep the night before your band gets inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then, so when I talk to those people, they give me a tip that they use to fall asleep. And then I go and try it for 2 weeks myself. And I have a super high-end sleep tracker that a friend of mine from the American Academy of Sleep Medicine loaned to me for this experiment. And you wear it on your head. It's almost like it's the next best thing to going into a sleep lab and having all the electrodes taped to your head. And then I'm just going to share that data in the book. So, okay, for 2 weeks, I'm going to try taking melatonin and track it for 2 weeks and see what the melatonin did. Spoiler alert, melatonin does nothing. It's garbage. Don't waste your money. And so at the end of the book, hopefully I will have found the thing that works for me, which might not be the same thing that works for you, but at least we've learned what things along the way are complete wastes of time and money and what things give you an actual shot.
Everything to me is a complete waste of time and money when it comes to trying to get sleep. I think caffeine naturally just doesn't have an effect on me. I can drink a pot of coffee and go right to bed.
Yeah.
But I
What?
think, yeah,
Really?
yeah, that's actually my nightly routine. If I'm going to get at least an hour of sleep, I try and tend to drink a pot of coffee right before bed. But I think my average caffeine consumption I've calculated up to is at least 3,200 milligrams of caffeine daily, and I don't feel any energy from it. I literally just drink energy drinks for the taste. I know that sounds a little bit like, oh, that's a little bit a lot, but
No,
it's
my kid does the same thing.
I've
She's
never
17 and she swears she drinks them for the taste.
I've literally I went to my buddy's house not even a few weeks ago, and I fell asleep for 10 minutes, and I woke up and it felt like 10 hours. I was like, "Oh my God, like what time is it?" And he's like, "I the Chinese food is ready to be picked up now. Like I just ordered it like 15 minutes ago. You have only been asleep for 15 minutes." I'm like, "Dude, it felt like I was asleep for like a year." And that's been every single time. I'll have a couple days where I'm up and I'll crash for about 15, 20 minutes, and then I'm fully rested like I've been asleep for 8 years, drool on the pillow and everything. So I started to study sleep. I was like, what is this whole, why am I experimenting this? I got into the hypnic jerk. I have my own theory on sleep as well, but my buddy sleeps with his eyes open. So I was like, what is going on here? There's a disconnect. There's this weird understanding that I feel like a lot of people are missing out on what the idea of sleep is. I feel like there's an abnormality for some people where, like for myself, I can function off a low level of sleep, even though I always have bags under my eyes and people always like to toss out that compliment. You look tired. Are you tired? I'm like, yeah, I'm fucking tired. But the concept of night watchers, you ever hear about that?
Sure.
So do you think that's a possibility that some people actually have that? Or you think that's just a dumb theory? Because I function off relatively little to no sleep, maybe an hour a night.
Okay. First of all, there are some people out there, and this is just what I've learned from talking to the sleep science people, because I've asked all these questions and I've asked people who that's how they pay the mortgage, is studying sleep
Yeah.
and having people in laboratories and stuff like that. What I've learned from them is that there is a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of the population that can do what you're describing and function on not a whole ton of sleep. What I've also learned is that that fraction of the population is so much tinier than people actually think it is. And the people who say that they can function on very little sleep assume that they're part of that population. But here's one of the things that I learned, and I learned it in the very first episode of my show. I was talking to a scientist named Adrian Owen, Dr. Adrian Owen. And after his name comes the letters OBE, which stands for Order of the British Empire. It's basically the science equivalent of being knighted by the Queen for his contributions to neuroscience. So kind of knows some stuff. He taught me in the very first episode of my show that there are probably millions and millions of people out there. You might be one, anybody watching or listening to this might be one, who function, and I'm underline and put it in yellow highlighter marker, function on 3, 4, 5 hours of sleep a night, and they're fine. Here's the thing though. What they're unaware of, before we started rolling, you were talking about there's a thing in your back that you need to pop. There's a bubble in your back that needs popping.
Yeah.
I'm reminded of a great bit that I saw on Dating Myself here, the Johnny Carson show, with Paul Reiser, who you might know from Mad About You. Paul Reiser, long before Mad About You, when he was just a stand-up comic, was sitting on the couch with Johnny, and he was talking about just stuff, just riffing, and he talks about that feeling that everybody in the world has experienced, where one of your ears will suddenly clear, and you didn't even know it was plugged, right? Almost like when you're about to land in a plane, and your ear goes, boop, and you go, oh, that's so good. I like that. Same feeling that you're looking for with your back, where there's all kinds of people where their back is going to go, and they're going to, oh, that's good. I didn't even know my back was messed up to begin with. Here's the thing. And here's how I'm tying it all into sleep. Probably millions and millions of people. You might be one. They have a whole other gear of awesomeness and achievement and focus and drive and everything else that they're not even aware that they have, because they're working on their 4 or 5 or 6 hours of sleep a night and they're functioning fine. So they never even get around to investigating. And if they were just to bump up their sleep, even by, I don't know, half an hour, whatever it is, because it's different for everybody, that much per night on a consistent basis, till you get to that point where you find that gear and you realize what it looks like. And then you go, Oh, okay. So yes, I can function on 3, 4, 5 hours of sleep a night, but I actually rock the world when I've gotten 6, and I just never got 6 habitually before. And so I just kind of got used to the 3, 4, 5 hours of sleep, me being the best that I can be, when actually there's a whole other level that you haven't even explored yet because you're not sleeping enough. For you, if you're telling me you can get by on an hour of sleep, I would love to stick electrodes to your head and put you in a sleep lab and see what's going on, because I'm worried about you longer term, because that's the thing, is that stuff like this, another researcher described it to me as your brain being kind of like an office building. And follow me with the metaphor as we go through this time together. You're going to see I make a lot of stupid metaphors, but here comes another one. Picture an office tower when everybody has gone home, right? The lights are out and the cleaning staff comes in and they start working on stuff. They do the vacuuming, they wipe down all the surfaces, blah, blah, blah. Of course, in the whole COVID age, that happens hourly, not nightly. But back in the days when we all used to go to an office and then go home at night and the cleaning staff would show up. Your brain works the same way, in that there's something called the glymphatic system. And when you get into REM sleep and deep sleep, your glymphatic system kicks in and it cleans out basically all the crud that has accumulated, all the biological waste products that have been accumulating in your brain all day. If you don't get that deep sleep and REM sleep habitually and regularly, then the crud begins to build up. And this is a universal, it happens to everybody on the planet. It begins to build up till it gets to a point where it's like cholesterol in your arteries. You don't necessarily know it's a problem until the day it becomes a problem. And then you got some work to do, because yes, it's possible to reverse that, but it takes a long time. So I'm concerned for you long term if you're doing an hour a night.
It's why I tend to use it in my productive ways, why I post an episode every single day. But I mean, I start my routine. Like, if you look at Mark Wahlberg's schedule, it's pretty intense. It's like 4:30 a.m., get up, pray for
Yep.
45 minutes, workout, do all. Mine is 2 times that, basically. I do, like, I'm up at 1 a.m., I'm doing a workout for 2.5 hours, get my day started, get whatever I need to get done, groceries. I get everything done, like, reasonable amount of time. Then I have this whole day where I can do whatever I want, where I just try and be
Sure.
productive with it as much as possible. But that hour or so of sleep feels like the longest thing to me when I wake up. I mean, a full dream where it feels like I've been asleep for 3 days. And I actually, when I get more sleep, I feel worse. Like, I feel horrible from it.
Well, that's a thing too, is Adrian Owen that I mentioned before. He did this study of, they called it the world's largest study of sleep and cognition. And what they did is they studied thousands and thousands and thousands of people. And what they found is that if you don't, we talk about that other gear, if you don't get that, and they found in their research that the sweet spot was about 7 to 9 hours, about 7 to 9 hours a night for most people. If you don't get that, let's say you habitually get 4, then from a cognitive perspective, you are functioning at the level of someone who is 10 years older than you. So your brain cognitively functions 10 years older. So if you're 40 years old and you get 4 hours of sleep a night, your brain is functioning as a 50-year-old's brain. And when you talk about cognitive impact, I mean, cognition is everything from big decisions about buying a car, buying a house, blah, 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 to is now a good time to make a lane change on the highway. So cognition factors into all those things. But the thing that the researchers found out that they weren't expecting to learn at all is that if you get too little sleep every night, you take that cognitive hit, but you also take that cognitive hit if you get too much sleep. So if you're getting 10, 11, 12 hours of sleep every night, then those people, their brains are also functioning at the same level as if they were 10 years older. Now, for you, I mean, you're a young guy, so 10 years older than you are is not necessarily a big deal. Where that's going to catch up with you is down the road. And like I said, so much of this stuff that I've learned all this now from all these different researchers, so much of this stuff is cumulative. And once you don't, like I said, you don't know it's a problem until the day it becomes a problem. And then you go, crap. It's like when the engine drops out of your car and you realize, oh, right, there's a whole oil change thing I was supposed to do, right? Yeah, I probably should get on that. Nope, it's too late now. You got to replace the whole engine. So it's one of those things where sleep is interesting because it's not like nutrition. Nutrition, there's a new study that comes out every day that's like, hey, remember that study that we were talking about last week? It's crap. It's garbage. Don't worry about it because we were completely wrong. And you talk about caffeine, you talk about cholesterol, you talk about, look, it was what, like 10 years ago that they came out with the study that said, have all the eggs you want because your dietary cholesterol doesn't impact your blood cholesterol. Have eggs, eat eggs with reckless abandon. And people were like, you told me for all these years it was going to kill me because I was going to jump my cholesterol. What the hell's wrong with you? And they were like, yeah, we were wrong. Sorry. Sleep research, though, just tends to march forward on this line because, and I don't know if it's that the sleep researchers don't make as much money hawking products as the nutrition people do. But they tend to not publish their stuff until it's like, no, we got this. This isn't just carved in stone. This is like carved in plutonium, like this is true and it's never going to change. Here you go. Here's some knowledge, which is fun. It's been a fun way to spend a bunch of time. I tend to get into these projects that I find fascinating, and I assume that I'm not the only person that finds them fascinating. So there's the whole sleep thing, which has so many tentacles and tendrils to it. There's the book, there's the podcast, there's the Can't Talk About It Yet television series, there's the YouTube series, there's all these different things going on. But then on top of that, about a year ago, my wife and I stumble upon the tiny house movement. You've seen this, right? You've seen all the tiny houses, right?
Yeah.
So these people will find a way to live comfortably in like 400, 500, 600 square feet of space, and they make it into a palace. Well, there's a whole subset of the tiny house people that they build their tiny house onto the chassis of a school bus. So they find a retired school bus, and when you think about it, a school bus is usually meant they're built to last about 500,000 miles, but school boards retire them long before they get anywhere near that kind of mileage. So people will get a hold of a school bus or a short bus or whatever size fits your life. They will rip the insides out of it, and then they will build a house inside of it. Yeah. Some people do it by taking that space and lifting the roof of the bus, whether it's a foot, 3 feet, however tall it is. I mean, you don't want to go higher than I think it's 13 and a half.
Few people do that in my town. They also turn them into pickup trucks as well.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen some of the pickup truck ones. Those are cool. So
they sell watermelons out of it.
It's a fun hobby. So what we decided to do, we're going to do one of these things. So I went in October and I bought a 40-foot school bus, and it's sitting out in a parking lot that's about, I don't know, quarter of a mile up the street. And in a few days, I'm going to start pulling everything out of it, ripping the insides out, lifting the roof up and building a house inside it, and documenting the whole thing for not only a podcast, but a YouTube series and all of that as well. But if you look around, you find out, like you said, there are thousands and thousands of these people out there. They call them schoolies. It's SKOOLIE. You can look it up. And some of the pictures are amazing of these people that have built these palaces into the frame of a school bus. And I look at it from this perspective. So I live in Toronto. If you go into the heart of downtown Toronto, you can, for $750,000 to $850,000, somewhere in that range, you can get a condo right in the heart of downtown, and you're on the 23rd floor, and you got a great view of downtown, blah, blah, blah. Oh, and for your $750,000, $850,000, you have 450 square feet of space. Well, I'm going to have that much in my bus, and I paid $3,500 for it. And outside of what it's going to cost me to actually build the house inside, that's $3,500, and I own it, and I don't have to pay for it anymore. And nobody can kick me out, and none of those things. Solar panels on the roof, so it generates its own electricity. The only thing I got to worry about is water and where to park it, and I'm done. And so you look at these people who've done it, and I'm saddened in a way by this movie that just came out. It just won the Golden Globe for Best Picture. It's probably going to win the Oscar for Best Picture, called Nomad Land.
Yeah.
And it's this movie about these people that live in their vehicles. Now, Nomad Land kind of portrays these people as homeless. And there's a line in the movie where the niece of the main character comes to her and says, "Are you still homeless?" And she says, "I'm not homeless, I'm houseless." There's a big difference. And you look at the people that are in the movie who are like scraping paycheck to paycheck and waiting for, special employment programs to begin at Amazon or whatever, so that they can find a way to pay for their next can of beans. And then you look at the people in the schoolie community who are, and there are thousands of them, and they're people in their middle, a lot of them are like middle 20s to middle 30s, and they're out there as entrepreneurs, and they're running businesses off of laptops and writing and designing and doing all this amazing work for other people. It's the ultimate in the gig economy. And then when they close the lid on the laptop and they call it a day, they're in some of the most scenic places in the world because that's where they happen to park the bus. Great, they're at Yellowstone, or great, they're in the middle of the Rocky Mountains, or wherever they happen to be is wherever they happen to park. If they got a good internet signal, they sit there, they do their work, they crank out their stuff, they watch the money roll in from their side hustles, and then they travel around and have the time of their lives. It's far from this sort of dark picture that the movie painted. So one of the things that I want to do with this other project, sorry, I don't want to turn this into Plugapalooza, but you asked me to talk about me, so I'm telling you what I'm up to. It's called Schoolie School, and school is with a K as well. It's not only to learn like best practices, how do you do this, what's the best way to build it. There's so much stuff I want to do. Like I want to put like a radiant floor in the bus, and a wood burning stove, and a recirculating shower, and build a full-on recording and TV studio, small but fully functional, all those different things. Learn how to do that the best way, but also fight the stigma that these people are up against, because people think of somebody that lives in a bus or a van or a whatever, and they think of the people in Nomad Land who are fighting to scrape together money for a can of beans, when instead there's some really ridiculously cool people out there that are doing this, making a great living. You look inside their bus and you see their marble shower that they built with their own, and you're like, okay, this is not what was in the movie. So I'm psyched. I'm literally starting that project tomorrow, with the popping out the rivets and taking all the metal and this everything out of the bus so that I can get all the stuff done. So you caught me on a good day, because this is my last day of sanity for like another 4 or 5 months.
Do you think that you're doing these projects because of the fact that you have so much free time because you don't sleep? Like that's where I found myself with not getting sleep. I start diving into different projects and other things of that sort that keeps me busy. Because I consider like if you're sitting on your phone, not sleeping, just staring up at the ceiling, just playing mindless stuff on your phone, it's a waste of
Yep.
time. But if you're finding a project you can get interested in, such as like I'll do a podcast at 1 a.m. I mean, I've done a full 48 hours of recording before, where I just went for 2 days straight, just recording every hour, doing that type of thing, because it's a waste of time for me just to be sitting around doing nothing, be sitting with my biggest fear is probably being with my thoughts, I think. But the whole concept of like just being productive with the time that I do have, if I can function off a low morality around a little bit of sleep or something like that, I consider that a benefit, considering I could be productive with the rest of the time that I have. I mean, there's some people I know that sleep all day. They'll sleep 18 hours a day, be up for 4 or 6 hours, and they'll go right back to bed like they're tired again. And I consider that a complete waste of time.
So when you say that you are concerned about being alone with your thoughts, are we having like a Oprah moment here where you have some kind of deep, dark thing you need to unburden yourself from?
No, I've talked about it before. I've used working out to get the inner demons, I would say, out of my head. I've tried depression medicine. I've tried sleep medication. I mean, that's sleep stuff, whatever it was called, bupropion or whatever I was taking. It was the depression and sleep medicine. I took it for a month. I hated it. You
Yeah,
couldn't hear your own thoughts, and
yeah.
not necessarily at all of them are bad, but I have things about me like you should be doing this, you should be doing that, you should be doing, things that are trying to keep me going and trying to progress rather forward rather than just staying in a state of lull. But I slept for a good 30 minutes on it, woke up, and then I didn't know where I was all day. I was like, it felt like I was walking around like a zombie, just my brain wasn't active. And so I cut that out quick, but
Yeah.
it's, it's,
One of the important takeaways of some of the other stuff I've learned, and it's a great forward phrase from a sleep doctor by the name of Matthew Walker, and he wrote a book called Why We Sleep. Now, I don't take a whole lot from what Matthew Walker's book says, because Matthew Walker, who is a brilliant sleep scientist, let's get that out there. But in his book, I think he made an effort to try and sort of shake people awake, and so made ties to, poor sleep gives you cancer and all these different kinds of things, that it sort of strains credulity, but one of the genius things in his book, he says, sedation is not sleep. And it's absolutely true. It's one of these things where, for example, people will say, oh, if I have a glass of red wine before I go to bed, I sleep like a baby. Maybe, in that you puke, cry, and shit your pants.
I can drink
But
whiskey and I can feel the same effect. Whiskey gives me sleep, but that's an antidepressant. There's no point in sedation when you're trying to sleep.
Well, right. And here's the thing, is that wine and all of those different things, they mess with what they call your sleep architecture. And your architecture is your sleep architecture. Your sleep is supposed to move in phases. You're supposed to go to this phase, and then you go to that phase for a while, and then you go to this phase, and you switch phases on and off all night. And a lot of people don't know this, but you probably wake up a whole bunch of times every night, and you don't remember any of them. But for most people, it's normal to wake up a few times and to move around a lot in the night, and things like that. This idea that you lie down and you're perfectly rigid and you stay in one position and you don't, nothing happens until your alarm goes off, it's crap. But what they learned was that, for example, wine or CBD or whatever it is that you happen to think will get you to sleep, it's true. Those things will help you fall asleep. But once you're asleep, those things mess with your ability to get to the various stages that you need to get in order for your sleep to actually be restorative and to have meant anything for you, which is why so frequently people will have that couple of glasses of wine before they go to bed, and then they wake up the next morning and they slept, they were out, but they don't feel particularly rested. And so it's those things that mess with the different stages of your sleep and can prevent you from getting the kind of sleep that actually, like, I hear about these people that wake up refreshed and ready to take on the day. I hate those people. I see them on the commercials, and I just, getting out of bed, and they're smiling and they're ready to greet the day. I'm like, shut up. I tossed and turned for the first hour and 45 minutes. Shut up. But there's reasons why that happens, and it's different for everybody. And the one thing that's absolutely true is that there is no magic bullet. It's one of the most confounding and frustrating things about the whole sleep world, is that there is no one thing that works for everybody. I talked about melatonin before. Melatonin's garbage.
I know. I've taken a whole bottle of it before. It doesn't do anything. I actually had someone message me saying, you can overdose on that. I'm like, it's fucking melatonin. That does not happen.
Right. So your body naturally produces melatonin. It's the thing that basically signals your body that it's time to go to sleep.
Yeah.
And so people made the mistaken impression that if I take a bunch of melatonin, I'll trick my body into thinking it's sleepy time and I go to sleep. No. What melatonin is good for is if you're jet lagged. And by the way, I'm not a doctor. I just talk to doctors daily, and have learned a lot of stuff for them. So I'm just so this is not medical advice. There should be like a little disclaimer across the bottom somewhere that says, this is not medical advice, blah, blah, blah. Neil Hedley is not a doctor, blah, blah. But what melatonin is good for, if you're jet lagged, you take the melatonin for a couple days, maybe 3 days, it will help your circadian rhythms get back into sync with where you are. Here's the thing about melatonin, though, is the timing of when you take the melatonin is critical. Otherwise, it's not really going to do much for you. The dosage is critical, and it's different for everybody based on weight and activity level and all these different things. So the idea that you can just go to Walmart and grab a bottle of melatonin, pop some pills, and suddenly you're gonna fix all your sleep issues, that's not how melatonin works. That's not how sleep works. That's not how your body works. And if you think it does, it's because something else is going on for you that coincidentally happened at the same time as the melatonin, and you're chalking it up to the melatonin, because it is absolutely 100% guaranteed not the melatonin that did it for you. There. Now you're going to get all these comments underneath, people going, he doesn't know what he's talking about. I've been taking melatonin for years and I sleep great. Nope.
If anybody's listened or taken a full episode of my show, and they'd know I don't think anything is true and I don't think anything is false. I consider any information that's out there that's what you would call fact, what you would call obvious. It's just I feel like we know a lot less than we think we'd like to know. You know what I mean? Space, all these other types of things that we can classify as like, if it's real in front of you, sure. But let's just say the aspect of like water, we call it H2O. Okay. Well, if another species comes down here, I bet you they'll have another name for it. So how can you classify that as H2O? You kind of can't.
You started me down a whole road. I was going to say, don't even get me started on space, because I found it so annoying when Kirk and Spock and McCoy would go to some planet and they would say, oh, we're at Antares 6. Well, what if the people that live at Antares 6 have a different name for it? Jackass? What
exactly.
Just because you think it's called that. Like, what if we go to Mars, and we get there and there's something that comes to greet us because we've been looking for the wrong definition of life. Something comes to greet us and goes, Mars? Where the hell did you get that name? This isn't Mars. It's beep boop bop, Yep. But we're so arrogant as a species that we figure that, because we have opposable thumbs and digital devices that we can hold in our hands, that we're so much smarter and better than everything else on the planet. No, we're not.
Yeah, well, it's trying to put things in classifications and specifications of what we want them to be. It's putting a label on something, which gets really intense because with the amount of information, the amount of technology that's expanded out so far, it's like a bunch of people will agree with you and be in your classification or label, whatever you want to say. But then they disagree on one thing. So they're like, I'm going to start my own. And then they start the same exact rules and everything, but one slight difference. And that's why everything nowadays just ends up becoming a cult. Like it's just a bunch of people starting their own cults and doing whatever, not doing the sacrificial stuff, but doing a bunch of crazy rules and ideals that they have people that follow them. I mean, social media is basically that in itself. It's about caring about your followers, trying to get your number to increase, trying to get a bunch of people to listen to you like you're the almighty, trying to strike this platform kind of scenario. And I'm like, I don't think anybody's right on anything. I'm not going to say religion's wrong. I'm not going to say anything's wrong because I have no fucking clue. And I think that's the best part when you can be so open to everything. And like even flat earthers, as much as I think that I'm pretty sure the earth is round, I don't fucking know. They make some good points. I look at their perspective and I see an amazing perspective of how they've convinced themselves or how they've seen something to make them think a certain way, which just, it keeps me kind of mind boggled on the aspect of the people that try so hard to get sleep, such as listening to certain tapes that help them lull them to sleep or other types of things, because I have had no need for more than I already get. When you say waking up multiple times in the middle of the night, that 1 hour stretches 8 hours, but that 1 hour is me waking up every 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and then being up for 20 minutes, trying to get right back to sleep to where
get
that
I'm talking about you wake
thing.
up. When I talk about waking up multiple times a night, like it's normal to wake up for a couple of seconds and be awake and then go right back to sleep and have no memory of the having been awake thing at all. It's funny that you talk about the labels thing though. Look at what's in the news right now, right? I mean, the difference, for example, between being, and this is more stark now than it has ever been at any point in history, the difference between, let's just deal with the big two, the difference between being a conservative and being a Republican. Those two things used to be synonymous. There used to be a time where if you were a conservative, you were by definition a Republican. Well, now those two things are like this. They have very little to do with each other anymore, courtesy of what's been going on the last 4.5 years in America, where now you've got this faction in the Republican Party that's talking about breaking off and not forming another party necessarily, because they don't just want to hand elections to the Democrats for the next 6 or 8 years. But this faction that looks at what the Republican Party has become and they go, sorry, that's not me anymore. And you've got Marjorie Taylor Greene out there who is on her own separate faction of the Republican Party, which even, I'm sure that behind the scenes, when no one's looking and when no one's taking pictures over your shoulder of you on your plane to Cancun, I'm sure that even the Ted Cruzes and those people of the world very quietly look at the Marjorie Taylor Greenes and they go, you're a nut, but I can't throw you under the bus because we play for the same team. So I'm going to have to find some kind of artful way to talk about you without wrapping my arms around you and embracing you. And so the labels are interesting. I mean, labels right out of the gate. I mean, if you want to go back further into the caste system and all of these different things and all these different classes, you and I are sitting down the morning after the Oprah Winfrey, Meghan Markle, Prince Harry interview.
I have no idea about that.
So
I don't even want to know. I can't. I don't have the time or energy to put in the effort to listen to that.
So here's what's interesting about that conversation, and people learned a lot of stuff last night. You want to talk about labels and classes and all of those different things. You look at the different ways that British people and the monarchy treated things that were going on in the royal family based on Meghan Markle being of mixed race. Her mom is Black, her dad was white. And I mean, conversations in the royal family about people expressing concerns about whether or not the baby's skin was going to be too dark when they were born. And it exposed this whole ugly, racist underbelly in the UK that they had previously been able to kind of keep quiet from the rest of the world. And then Meghan Markle comes along. And all of a sudden, everybody, like not everybody in the UK, but everybody in the UK is forced to stand back and go, hold on. That's not something we do. We don't talk about other people like that. And then there's other people in that conversation going, hell yeah, we do. We just don't talk. We haven't talked about it out loud up until now. And it exposed this whole thing. You bring up social media. Social media, there are people who blame social media for so many societal ills. Social media doesn't cause societal problems. It exposes them.
Yeah.
Because it takes the wingnuts and the losers and the whoever's, and it gives them a platform where suddenly they don't have to just express their repugnant opinions in their mother's basement. Now they can throw them out there for the world to see. And if they happen to choose the right set of hashtags, then a whole pile of people all over the world, even if it's only for a millisecond, will get exposed to those repugnant beliefs. And maybe, just maybe, one of those people that also ascribes to that repugnant thing that you believe goes, I like this guy, follow. And so suddenly you've got the beginnings of, you've got a group, and then a group becomes a cult, and then a cult becomes a movement, and then a movement becomes a whatever else it becomes. And that happens for good and for bad. It's sadly, there's just as much, I think, bad comes from this. In fact, there's probably more vile and vitriol and sorry, I meant to say bile and vitriol on social media than there is anything good. I feel like so many of the people that are trying to do good things on social media are just spitting into the wind, because it's tilted so far the other way. Look, I guarantee you that give us 3 months after this episode runs, and you look at the comments that are underneath, and there are going to be people saying all kinds of horrible things.
That's why you do what I do and you disable them.
Right. Okay, so that's good. See, I didn't know that.
I
Thank you.
disable that and I disable likes, I disable dislikes, I disable anything because the main issue is with that when you start focusing and harnessing way too much time on a comment, when it starts going to the likes and the dislikes,
Yep.
it eventually creates madness. What I think the main problem with me and social media is the idea that now and it's not just social media, it's really with the internet in general, and that it's creating an era of schizophrenics because it's a lot of
Sure.
people that are finding information that is not necessarily true, but they see the first article and they click it and they think that's fact. And then they build up this perception of something that is
QAnon.
not entirely true. Kind of, yes, like that. But it goes into more events also when someone says, well, what about this? What about this? There's a book that came out that was recommended by Jordan Peterson. It was about the Comanches. It told all the horrible acts the Comanches did and all this. And I had talked to a person who studied indigenous studies and told me that book's racist, that book's this, that book's. I'm like, it's got 8,000 people that recommend it in 5 stars, and it's got 20 bad reviews. I was like, what about the book is racist? They didn't give me any evidence. They didn't give me anything about it. They just ignored me and then went off and did their own thing. And I said, fine, whatever. Trying to find the information, but sometimes like it's the same thing with like why people say there's some radical feminists out there. It's because they've seen so much of one thing that's built up this anger, this frustration, this wanting to do something, but it's all in the eyes of how you're viewing it. Somebody could view a flat earth article and read all the information about. I've been one of my lifelong heroes, my childhood hero, who's a friend from doing the podcast, fucking is a flat earther. And he was convincing me in a 3-hour podcast he won't let me release. And I'm like, oh my God, like you're making sense the way you're talking about it. But I know from what I've seen that that's not, and it's just a whole era of schizophrenia where people don't know what to believe. They think Hillary Clinton's a reptile sucking off puppies or some shit. It's goes into this madness state. And I think social media has an issue because I think it exposes you to way too much. Now, when you were saying about like the idea of UK and the idea of racism down there, the issue is that everyone's focused on America because they don't want to focus on the own problems in their own country. Canada
Sure.
has issues, UK has issues, China has issues. Everyone's got their own issues, but they need to find something that gets them off themselves and focused on a target, focused on one thing, which happens to be the States. Now,
Yeah.
when you do that, you create a whole era of open platform for everyone to say whatever the hell they want. And then that creates tension because as soon as you start knocking America, then I'm going to get defensive of the place that I'm from because that means you're
Yeah.
labeling everybody over here. Not saying that you're doing that. I'm just making a generalization
No,
statement.
I get it.
But that
And
is
and it's funny that you say that too, because Canada, one of Canada's hobbies, other than hockey,
watching
is
Americans politics.
not is knocking Americans. It's
I have a lot of Canadian friends from doing the podcast. Let me tell you, every time something goes on over here, they're sending me pictures. I'm like, dude, I fucking get it, man, but it's not
yeah.
just here. It's elsewhere also. But with
So the thing is, I mean, the thing that I bring to those conversations among Canadians is I lived and worked in America for 13 years. And my wife is from America, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. My 17-year-old lives in Connecticut with her mom, et cetera, et cetera. So here's something that I'll throw out there because Canadians don't talk about this very much. Let's talk COVID-19 for a second. Canada's response. So going into it, when things first started, let's wind the clock back 13 months. Canada was looking at the United States and universally Canadians were going, oh, I'm so glad I'm here and not in America. That is just a shit show down there. They are, oh man, have they ever bungled this? Okay, so now wind the clock forward to where we are today and compare our response in Canada to the response in America. Canada's response to COVID-19 has sucked. No two ways about it. There is no other way to look at it. If you compare the way that Canada has responded in terms of vaccination plans, all these different kinds of things, Canada has bungled this thing. We're here to put it in hockey parlance and to borrow a line from a comedian friend of mine named Jim McAleese. If COVID-19 is Canada getting a penalty shot in a hockey game, we grab the penalty shot and we dump it in the corner. Like we could not have bungled this worse than we have bungled it. But you've got Canadians all over the country going, well, it's okay because we got a whole bunch of vaccinations coming in the summer and everybody's going to be vaccinated. You've got the United States saying everybody that wants a vaccine will be able to get one. Now the latest update I heard was by the end of May or beginning of June. Canada set this target of everybody's going to be vaccinated by the end of September, which do the math on that right out of the gate. But then if you look at the targets for how many people in Canada would have to get vaccinated every day to be able to hit that target, and how every single day we fall further and further behind. We are only at a fraction here of vaccinating the number of people. So the rude awakening for Canada when it comes to COVID-19 is that we got forced to look at the way the recovery and the vaccinations and all of that is going in America. And we're looking at ourselves and we're going, damn, that tweet didn't age well, did it? And it's the Canadian hobby is to look down at America. But every once in a while, America, it's like Canadians every once in a while will remind Americans that we beat you in the War of 1812. Okay, that's great. But if the tables were turned, pack your bags, Canada, find somewhere else to live, because we lose in about an hour. So it's just all this stuff that Canadians do because we don't like to. I keep forgetting that I'm not on radio or television right now, so I can say whatever. We don't want to admit that our shit stinks in Canada. And so all you have to do if you want to humble a Canadian is go COVID-19 response, dealing with your Indigenous communities and your dark past, Canada, with Indigenous peoples, and all these various things that you can throw at Canadians and go, then you just watch them kind of shrink and go, yeah, okay, you're right, eh? And we have no basis to fight with you on it. And it's interesting for me because I've lived in both places and I've gotten to see Canadian and American relations from both sides. I mean, Robin Williams had that great line where he said that Canada is like a really nice 2-bedroom apartment over a meth lab, which, a lot of Canadians still point to that and go, yep, that's exactly what it is. But then you go to America, where there are pockets of America where Canada's like a rumor. It's like, what? Really? Do they look like us? Really? Yeah. Huh? And it's just fun watching, because most Canadian culture, unless it's forced upon us by the government, most Canadian culture comes from America. The biggest show on Canadian television last night on Canadian television was the Oprah interview with Harry and Meghan. Other than Hockey Night in Canada and Schitt's Creek, there are no big Canadian shows in Canada. Now, there are a lot of American shows that are done in Canada because it's easier, cheaper, better here. And there's an insane talent pool here in Canada that grew up on American television and so are eager to try and duplicate it. I think every Star Trek series that's in production right now is produced in some part of Toronto. Discovery is shot in the east end of the downtown core. The new series that features Captain Christopher Pike and all that is shot out in the west end by the Toronto airport. Like all the Star Trek series get done here. So much science fiction television gets done for whatever reason in Canada, and other things are. Look, I mean, Schitt's Creek was a huge hit in Canada, and no one heard of it until all of a sudden the American audience started to pay attention and went, "This is hilarious. This is a funny show." And then it wins all these awards. And so finally, when it has its one big season where everybody in the world is watching Schitt's Creek, it was their final season because they'd already been on the air for 6 years. And nobody cared because it was a Canadian show. It's just one of those. It's the same in arts and music.
Yeah.
If you're a band in Canada and you don't have a record deal with an American label so that you also have distribution in the United States, best get a second job, because you're not going to be in your Canadian band for very long and be able to get groceries, because there's just not a big enough market here to be able to sustain you.
Maybe
but there's so many.
Well, maybe it just speaks on my personality. Maybe it's something bad about me. But whenever I hear, even if it's like you saying like these things about Canada that I could be using in whatever to make a Canadian person kind of shrivel up if they're talking crap on America, I look at it as in defense of Canada too. I just have this side that's like, I don't like when someone talks to another person like they have more information than the next person, because my belief is that we're all kind of on the same playing field. Just because I've talked to people with PhDs, radio astrophysicists, geologists, archaeologists, you can name them all. I've talked to them all. but they know specific things about that topic, yes, but not about everything. And what happens is it gets broad brush that when you have a PhD means you know more than the next person that probably knows a lot more than you do. And that's my issue, is because when you start thinking that you have a higher level of intelligence than someone, then you start talking down to them. The pedestal has now been raised. And I don't like
Sure,
that.
sure.
And that's with anything. I could say like, okay, I'm not religious at all, but if someone starts talking bad about religion, I'm like, hang on a second. Like there's a reason why there's a large amount of population that go to that, because it's something that comforts them. It's something that brings
Yep,
them mystery, something that brings them this idea of faith.
yep.
And it's because I consider having one view or having such a strong opinion where you're not going to let any others in, or you're going to attack someone else's beliefs. I'm like, fucking, you can't be that simple minded right now. Like that's the whole reason why we're fighting each other over the dumbest shit. Like it's
Yep.
everything on Twitter is just a massive war right now. And I'm like, why are we fighting about what? Who gives a shit if somebody spoiled WandaVision for you? Fuck off and watch it yourself. It doesn't make sense.
Right. I mean, but you take this back to politics for a second. It's interesting because if you look at most issues in America right now, there's two ways to think. There's the ways that the Democrats look at this issue, and there's ways that the Republicans look at it. And if you look at it in some kind of third way, then you're some kind of outcast or rebel or whatever it is. And if you're a Democrat, you have to think this way about it. And if you're a Republican, this is the opinion that you're supposed to have about it. I've always thought that, and let's acknowledge, I mean, you want to talk about, dismissing people as being not as intelligent as you, blah, blah, blah. In the last election, let's not forget, Donald Trump got 70 something million votes. What is it? 71 million, 72 million votes. Not every, news flash for you, spoiler alert, not every one of those 72 million people is an idiot or a racist or a QAnon believer or a whatever. They just didn't happen to be on the winning side of the election, because news flash again, not all of the 80 million people that voted for Joe Biden are rocket scientists. So let's dispense with that for a second. But this idea that because you have, and we're back to the labels conversation again, because you have this, then you must think that way. It's a source of nothing but division and discord. I've always thought that one of the smartest things a president could do, and I would never run for president because, first of all, can't. I would never run for elected office, even though
Why would you want to?
one of the political parties in America aggressively tried to recruit me for about a decade to run for local office. I want no part of it, but I always thought that the smartest thing a president would do is forget about party for a second and just, you talk about cabinet posts and all of these different things. So who's going to be the Secretary of Agriculture? Okay, find me the smartest farmer in the country, the most successful farmer in the country, not necessarily the richest farmer in the country, but the one who knows more about it than anyone else. That's the person that should be coming up with agricultural policy. Talk to me about a Secretary of Education. Okay, who is the smartest person in the country when it comes to education? Typically what happens, and it happens on every country where they have secretaries of or ministers of or whatever, it's somebody in the party that is a prominent figure in the party that you owe them a favor, or they got pictures or whatever it is. So you're going to make them what's an opening? I got to find something for Bob. What Secretary of Defense? Bob, you're the Secretary of Defense. Okay.
Yep.
I know I owe you $20. I know. Can we knock it down to 15 if I make you the Secretary of Defense? Okay, good. You're the Secretary. What? You've never held a gun. That's okay. You're the Secretary of Defense. Starting like, it's not about, and it should be this the biggest waste of time. If you ever want to completely lose faith in the system, watch CPAC or watch C-SPAN or watch any of those things. Not CPAC in the United States, was a whole other thing. CPAC is basically C-SPAN in Canada, where you sit and you watch the day-to-day goings on in the various legislative bodies. And you sit there and you could do it in a split screen with your kids' daycare, and you realize that there's more civility and constructive conversation in your kids' daycare than there will ever be in the Senate or in Congress or in the House of Commons or whatever, because they're all just there to hopefully say the thing that gets them on the 6 o'clock news and makes them famous, which hopefully will boost their chances of reelection, or they're going to do the thing that the party has demanded that they do, even if it's not really what they think, it's what they got to say, because the party is going to be all over them if they don't and not support their reelection, blah, blah. What the Senate and Congress and all of that should be, get rid of all of it, get rid of the two-party system, and let's just get the best and brightest in a room together to come up with policy and help make decisions. So let's take my earlier thing even further. Rather than having a Secretary of Agriculture, let's get 1,000 farmers together in a room and just sit there, and all 1,000 of them from everywhere and all political stripes and all different viewpoints, blah, blah, blah. Let's get them in a room together and let's get them to hammer out policy on agriculture. Let's get the 1,000 richest people, smartest people, most successful business people, whatever it is, go to the best and brightest in every field that there is, put them in a room, and they're the ones that come up with policy. And we look at that policy and we go, okay, so this guy over here managed to go into a field of sand, and 6 months later, it was a beautiful tropical jungle. He knows something I don't know, and I should probably listen to him, because if it were up to me with that field of sand, 20 years from now, it's still going to be a field of sand, except he turned it into something amazing, and I'm going to listen to him. And there's tons of people just like him who are just as smart as him or as smart as her or whatever, who should be the ones that are coming up with, not because this guy over here said the racist thing on the campaign trail that his base absolutely loved him for, and so they went and voted for him because
you saw the same thing with Biden, for instance. After he was elected, all these people that were fighting to get him elected after he was elected, there's a hashtag on Twitter like 2 weeks in saying liar Biden. And it was
Yep.
because he wasn't doing anything he was saying. And I was like, yeah, see, the issue is that you have a bunch of people in a room that are nodding and agreeing with you instead of having a bunch of people in a room that are disagreeing with you. Not saying that
Yep.
fighting is the best, but having different varies of opinion are the best ways to run. Like if I was going to be president, I don't ever want to be, but if I was going to be, I would give them the best answer possible. And the answer that's going to shock a lot of people, and it's, I don't know. I don't know, and I'm not going to be the one that's going to figure it out. I'm going to elect the
Yep.
person that I know would be best suited for the job. The
Yep.
issue is people look at someone, they want a good speaker, like Obama was a good speaker. He probably would have handled the pandemic a little bit better than Trump on the aspect of he wouldn't have been so outrageous. They had a thing going when I was working out at the gym was on the TV. It was his impeachment. It was the trial. It was the best of Trump. That's what it was. They chopped up all his fucking outrageous saying and all his bits and did a best of Trump, where it was just a segment of all his bits. Like it was like if I typed in best of whatever comedy performances on YouTube, and then I got to see a 15-minute clip of all the clips and segments from everything he's ever done. That's what that whole thing was to me. I could not stop laughing because I'm listening to fucking Celine Dion in my headphones, and I'm seeing where he quoted saying, I walked past security guard. He warned me there was a guy in the crowd with a tomato. I said on stage, if anybody sees a guy try to throw a tomato at me, punch him in the face and I'll pay for your lawyer. I couldn't stop laughing because of how outrageous that was. But people can't be mad because they appointed him to office. Now, that might have been whatever population that appointed him in there, but they wanted this outrageous guy. They wanted something that was out of the norm, and they realized that didn't go well. It didn't help in a situation. Now,
Sure.
my issue is when people can be so one-sided on something and not
Yep.
listening to another opinion. But also what's coming out now is that there's an FBI case that's under trial because they found out that they weren't going to open up the economy until after Trump was out of office. They were going to give all the credit to Biden, in fear that if they opened up the economy when Trump was in office, that Trump would get the credit for it because the economy did a lot better. But I'm like, fucking coronavirus doesn't care about Biden and Kamala Harris. They don't care. Why? So it's just getting better now that they're in office. It doesn't make any sense. But people are like, no, it's because they're doing better things. I'm like, they haven't done anything different. All the relief packages is went to other places instead of going to here. And now we're finally getting what, $1,400 now? people were complaining about the fucking 600, but they went and spend it like it was nothing. So I look at it like you're going to complain about the money you got saying it's not enough. It is not enough, but then you're going to go and spend it on a fucking pair of shoes or pairs. No wonder they're not giving you more money. It's this weird push and pull of people are literally contradicting themselves on the things that they're saying. And I'm like, stop trying to fight with people where we're all kind of trying to reach to the same goal. And the same goal is trying to find a way to live, trying to find a way to afford things. There should be other things we should be focusing on rather than certain things. And it becomes an issue because now when you're electing something or when you're speaking on a platform like a podcast, like we are, there are things that you won't say because you know it's going to piss people off, even though you believe in those things heavily. And it's like an issue because when someone gets elected now, they won't say certain things if it's going to offend a certain movement or offend a certain thing, like when they did with the riots. No riots are acceptable. Stay on lockdown, except if it's a Black Lives Matter protest. And everyone's like, what? Like, what the fuck we get it. We understand the point behind it. Like, it's important to have this, but at the same time, you're contradicting yourself in what you're saying. But it was this aspect, I don't want to piss off a certain amount of people because they can take me down. And I'm like, the people have power. That's the whole point of it all. We're supposed to have this power, but now we're realizing how much we have, but we're fighting over really stupid shit and not trying to fix the main core issues. That why our whole foundation needs to go back to the beginning. It needs to go back to this whole new platform of, first of all, the internet. My biggest issue is the censorship thing. I don't think anybody, when the internet was coming out, they thought it was going to be this big, or they probably would have put more charges on it. But it's become this major platform. And I think everyone looks to YouTube, looks to Fox News, which calls themselves entertainment. But it's Fox News, it's in the name. So you think of it as a news source. They're all entertainment platforms, but they're privately owned as well. So they can put up whatever they want to fucking put up. And you consider that factual information because it's on the news, and it's not true. But a lot of people are now starting to see that with YouTube. People are Australia banned Google, like they're banning Facebook. They're banning a bunch of platforms because they're skewing results based on paid partnerships. So like, for instance, I use this example. A doctor gave himself the vaccination shot and he died. That's going to happen. It happens with any vaccine. There's that anomaly. There's that 0.% chance that it could be that thing. But Google hid that. You could not find that on Google. Typing up any way you want to, doctor vaccine, doctor death vaccine, whatever. It did not come up. It was on like the 50th page. Nobody ever goes 50 pages in unless you're going straight to the last page. Nobody looks at the 36th page or the 37th page. You typed it into DuckDuckGo. DuckDuckGo is a whole nother search engine, showed you it as a top result because they're not in paid partnerships with anything. Google's in paid partnerships with Facebook, other types of entertainment sources such as Fox News, CNN. So they were making sure that wasn't getting out there. That's my issue, is where we're having an era of schizophrenics right now because a bunch of people hear things, they go, that's conspiracy, that's bullshit, that's QAnon, that's whatever. There are some things that are not real, like QAnon. But it's creating an air of schizophrenia because now you don't know what the fuck to believe in, and we're only shooting ourselves in the foot. So instead of looking at someone from Canada and America, look at them. We're all the fucking human species, and we're not surviving well. We're fighting with each other pretty heavily, where I'm like, if aliens, as much as they're releasing information about it, if they are real and they're looking down here, I don't understand why they don't just take us out, because this is fucking ridiculous.
They don't have to. Wait a little bit longer. We'll take care of it for them, and they can save the ammo. I mean, that's one of the things I loved about Will Smith movie called Independence Day.
Yeah.
Where, I don't know, and if you haven't seen it before, here's the idea: the
Who hasn't
aliens
seen
show up and they're
Independence Day?
pissed. Pardon me?
He said, who hasn't seen Independence Day? That's a fucking
never know.
icon.
You never know. So the aliens show up and they're pissed, basically, is what happens. And so Earth has to unite to fight the aliens. And I love that movie because of the whole idea that, and it's sorry, not to get nerdy, but it's the whole premise that Star Trek was built on, was this idea that there will be a time sometime in the future where we will stop being Americans and Canadians and Africans and Australians and blah blah. We're people, we're humans. And that's the planet over there that we happen to live on. I look forward. I'm not going to see it, and probably my 2-year-old is probably not going to see it. And I don't think we're going to actually see it until we have our Independence Day moment. I don't think that world peace and all of these different things and actual, you've got so many people that are talking about how one of the things that they really want for the world is tolerance. No, I don't want tolerance. I don't want to tolerate people. That makes it sound like tolerance. If you really think about the word itself, tolerance is you irritate me or piss me off, or I find you repugnant, but I'm not going to do anything about it. I'm going to tolerate you. No, what we should be looking for is acceptance. What we should be looking for is everybody just getting on the same page together. You never heard a reference in a single episode of Star Trek to someone talking about the fact that Mr. Sulu was Asian. You never heard anyone talk about how Uhura was black. You know why? Because by that time in the, oh my, that's a good decay. You get that far ahead in the future, and yeah, we get to a stage where we're all just people. We're all just people. And I really don't think we're going to get there until the day when we're staring down the barrel of some space laser that's going to wipe out the entire planet, unless we find a way to actually all come together as one bunch of people to take care of it. I don't think it's going to happen.
Takai was one of the sleep tapes I tried to listen to help get sleep. And let me tell you, that's the most uncomfortable thing you can ever listen to in your entire life. That just gives you nightmares.
So George Takei's been out there a lot lately because of this whole thing that's going on in California, where people, because for such a long time, COVID was being referred to as the Wuhan flu or the China virus or whatever, these Asian Americans are just getting tackled, stabbed, murdered in the streets from people who are running up to them and going, "You caused the virus," and then taking it out on people. And there's all this footage that's out there running of 70-year-old Korean guy walking down the street, and he's just minding his own business walking down the street, when somebody comes up behind him, whacks him in the head, knocks him into a pole, and he's dead. And George Takei has been out there recently as sort of one of these prominent voices in the Asian American community, going, "Are y'all aware of what's going on? Why are you not doing something about this? Who's going to help? Why are we not banding together to address this?" But I look
Takai's
at,
got a weird story though. He was his whole traumatic childhood past and all that
yeah,
too that he talks about, and he talks about it like as a beneficial thing too. It was like
yeah,
helped him realize who he was, which is a weird, I guess, come to grips thing with the situation he was dealt with. But I mean, I've listened to Eric Weinstein talk about there's a level 4 lab in Wuhan where the virus originated from and stuff like that. So it's not out of the realm of possibility if that was created in a lab somewhere. But at the same time, there's no point in why are you going to attack someone that's not has nothing to do with that over
right,
there. They're not even from there. But I mean,
right.
you look in New York, there's videos of people getting beat to death with bats. So I mean, that's just the whole aspect. I think when you put all these people and they lose so much, they just get to this Mad Max scenario. I mean, we saw that in oh God, what is the name of the place? It's not Milwaukee, I think. I'm gonna forget. But when they defunded the police, that whole state defunded the police, and then now they're ramping it back up double the budget because it literally went to Mad Max scenario where people were shooting people in the middle of the street and there were no people to arrest them. There was this whole idea of like the cops are bad. You're going to have bad cops. Yes. I think we all
Yeah,
have went to school probably with a guy where like, oh my God, he became a cop. It's like, yeah, that dude became a cop. You're like, fuck, we all know that person. But at the
sure.
same time, that's not the majority. I know a lot of good people in the police department. I've had a gun pulled out on me before from a cop just for being scared with everything that's going on in the news before. And I'm not of a certain ethnicity where I would get that. But guess what? It's the fucking world. You're going to come across that one guy that probably isn't fit for that position. And it's a very tasking and stressful job. That's why I try and tell people like to have this fight, to have this movement towards one thing that you strongly believe in. I'm happy you have one thing you can strongly believe in, but I don't think you should be tearing down anything else and trying to destroy other people's beliefs because they don't fit your justification on what the belief is. You know what I mean?
Sure.
It's like same thing with religion. I got my minister's license because I came across a couple of priests on my boardwalk in my town that were condemning people to hell for not believing in Jesus Christ. So I was like, what? Like, I'm not religious, so I got my uh minister's license under the United Church of Bacon. Swear to you, I picked the dumbest church I could find, and I found that I went to my town and paid $45. It took an hour and a half of my time to get a freaking minister's license.
Oh, don't besmirch bacon, man.
It's
No,
that's
no.
it's really a safeguard for atheists. It's what parody religions have, this whole deeper freaking meaning that you can, like, same thing. If I saw a butterfly one time and I almost hit it with my car and it just missed the car and I was like, oh my God, that's like all of us suddenly just missing the car of light. It was this whole religious thing. And then 10 minutes later, I was like, fucking, if I would have killed that butterfly, I would have a totally different effect. That's what parody religions are. They're just taking something crazy and ridiculous and turning it into something beautiful where people can find a deep meaning out of it. But
Okay, ready? Ready?
what?
Here, let's go down the religion road for a second.
Oh Jesus,
I'm
we're
going to
hitting all
throw
the big pegs, aren't we?
hey, politics, religion,
Sleep.
well, yeah, sleep. Which before COVID was about to, like, the medical community was like, sleep is the next global health crisis, and then COVID went, here, hold
Depression.
my beer. But here's the thing. Let me throw a fun religious one at you, and you may have no response to this whatsoever, or we may go down a whole rabbit hole. Santa Claus. I had a conversation once, which then sparked several subsequent conversations with a bunch of other people that wear robes for a living, where I said, here's where I think you guys are missing the boat. And when I say you guys, I mean like the clergy,
Yeah.
are missing the boat on Santa Claus. I said, rather than condemn Santa Claus and talk about how it takes Christ out of Christmas and all these different things, why don't
That
you?
goes deeper than you think, dude. That goes. Hitler did that for 2 years in Germany.
I hear you. But so rather than pegging this all on Santa Claus, why are you not? Why are you guys not using Santa Claus as an entree? And I'm like, what do you mean? Okay, Santa Claus can see you when you're sleeping. He knows when you're awake. He knows if you've been bad or good. So be good for goodness sake. If you do good things, Santa Claus rewards you. If you don't do good things, Santa Claus washes his hands of you when you're done. I said, what an easy way for a 3-year-old to wrap their head around the idea of someday down the road, God, Jesus, whatever it is you want to throw at them. I said, instead of spending your time trying to get a 3 or a 4 or a 5-year-old to understand the Immaculate Conception and all these different things, why don't you get them to wrap their heads around the idea that there might be this omnipresent being who loves you and wants you to be happy. And if you do good stuff, they'll reward you. And every single time I've had that conversation with someone in the clergy, they've gone, you might be onto something there. But we get into this thing where we are, Santa Claus is blasphemy and diminishes Christ. And so we're going to take the 3, the 4, the 5-year-olds in Sunday school, and we're going to teach them all the things that are in the button. No, if you want to, no, don't take the Bible and put it in a cute little cartoon book full of stories that are meant for toddlers. Tell them about Santa Claus. And then down the road, you get to go, by the way, Santa Claus has another name. We call him God, or whatever, however it is you want to get them to
I have
wrap their heads around it.
so many answers for you on this. I did
Bring
not
it.
think I was going to, because you said you might not have an answer, so I was expecting not to have one. One,
Bring it.
why would you not want to worship a deity that has the answers to everything, but whenever you ask a question, he says you just have to have faith or you just have to have this? My second one is, what happens if a giant deity tells you to build an ark? That sounds fun. That's way better than Santa Claus. My third one is when he tells you to kill your son, and then right when you're about to do it, he goes, hut, that, 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 that. I was just testing your faith. That's a way better way to explain it to kids, but that's how they do it. And it's like, there's probably your way to get a kid to wrap their head around the idea of what God is. Is it around us? Is it this whole entire thing? But it's the stories. Remember recently, the Vatican was getting canceled, but you know
So
how they fixed it? They just took the priests that were involved in all the child things And they were like, we're just going to keep them away from the public. We're going to have them do separate duties in the Vatican. And everyone like, that sounds okay. I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? It's been long talked about the Vatican having issues with this and religion. And there's certain organizations that have this issue. But now people are like, wait a minute, why don't we work on this? It's like, oh, good job. You're fucking following the trail you're supposed to be working towards to cut down, not Dr. fucking Seuss. I don't read Dr. Seuss. I don't really care too much for green eggs and ham. I would not
Don't
want
even
it
get
on
me
a
started
boat.
on
I
Dr.
wouldn't even
Seuss.
want it on a float.
Don't even get me started on Dr. Seuss goes back to that whole thing we were talking about before. There is a channel on television that you can watch where they will tell you, and all of their various high-rated talking heads will tell you that Dr. Seuss got canceled by Joe Biden because it is cancel culture run amok. When actually Joe Biden had absolutely nothing to do with it. It was because Dr. Seuss's estate went, yeah, you know that book that we've got that's got the people wearing the turbans carrying the elephant? That doesn't make Indian people feel very good. Let's just not even put that out there anymore, because we got a billion books over here that make them feel awesome. And so why do we want to do something that makes them feel like they just got punched in the stomach? Let's get rid of that book. And you've got an entire news channel that's dedicated to the idea of, no, we absolutely want to take that book that makes people feel like they've been punched in the stomach, and we not only want to make sure that it stays on the shelves, we want to force them to read it. Like, stop. Learn why the book actually got taken off the shelves. You talk about the Vatican and the priest thing. So, and I don't get to talk about this at length very often, but I will now.
Wait, hold on. Before we go into that real quick, I do want to talk about the cancel in the book of Dr. Seuss.
Yeah.
I'm for that, but also I want to add something to that. If we're canceling that because it makes Indian people feel bad, which I'm like, you never want to make someone feel bad, but can we cancel saltines? Because I'm tired of people calling me a cracker. It just gets really fucking annoying, and I'm really sick and tired of it. Why is it always white men on a steak? You know how that makes me feel being white? Like, it fucking hurts my feelings too. And I look at people as people. But nobody ever looks at that perspective. But continue into the religion. I'm all right with that.
No, this has actually nothing to do with religion, but the reason why all of that stuff is a hot button for me. I remember I told you way back, like about 53 minutes ago, I said that as near as I could figure out, I've been fighting insomnia since I was about 6 years old.
That was about an hour and 15 ago, but thank you.
Oh, we've been here that long. Sorry. Let me know.
I like it. This is fun. Let's keep going. I'm good.
No, this reminds me in another life of a conversation I had with well, let's just say an Oscar-winning actor.
Leonardo DiCaprio.
No, not that one.
Mel Gibson.
But we had an interview scheduled, and the thing that his people forgot to do was tell either one of us what the timing was on the interview. So, I mean, I assumed that we probably had 6 or 8 minutes, which is typical for if you get an Oscar winner to come on your radio morning show, you probably got them for about 8 minutes. And so I assumed we were going to do 8 minutes, and he gets on the phone and he says, how long are we doing? And I said, they didn't tell you? And he said, no. Did they tell you? I said, no. He laughs and he says, well, I tell you what, why don't we just keep talking until we run out of stuff to talk about?
That's how I do it.
Let's just see how long that goes. And instead of 8 minutes, it was more like 58 minutes. And he was the nicest guy. In fact, now that I've pointed out what a nice guy he was, I'll tell you who it was, because it's to prop up what a nice guy he was.
Can I guess?
It's Kevin Costner.
Damn it. I was gonna say Morgan Freeman.
I would love to talk to Morgan Freeman.
Ever since I was a little boy, people have enjoyed the sound of my voice.
See, that's more like that Billy Crystal scene in When Harry Met Sally, where he says, I have decided that for the rest of the day, we are going to talk like this.
Mm-hmm. I could do other impressions, but he's not in my wheelhouse.
So Costner he was a gem the whole time. And what was funny was, it was the same day, if you Google this, it was the same day that his oil separating machines were being deployed in the Gulf of Mexico from the BP spill. It was the same day. Later on that day, his oil separating machines that he owned were being deployed in the Gulf of Mexico, but he made almost an hour for me and my little morning show just to hang out because we were having fun talking. So anyway, total sidebar. So the reason that and this is according to the researchers and the people who've been staring at the way my brain functions, the reason that I have been fighting insomnia since the age of 6 is because since about the age of 6, there has been a perception welded deep in my brain that says that bed is not a safe place to be. And that is because at the age of 6, a member of my family used me as a sex toy.
Jesus.
And repeatedly. And what's weird is, and I don't know why I'm going to choose right now to be the forum to do this. I have never been able to do this until today. I will tell you that it was my brother Ray that did that. The reason I can tell you it was my brother Ray who did that to me when I was 6 years old is because he just passed a couple of months ago. And so I am no longer interested in protecting his identity or anything like that. I've been vague for decades now about who it was because I have multiple siblings. And so I never even said brother because I have another brother who's a wonderful human being and wouldn't hurt a fly. And I didn't want, even just by me saying the word brother, for anyone to assume that it was this one instead of the one that was actually responsible for it. And so that was the kickoff for me at 6 years old to this wonderful journey with mental health issues and depression and a PTSD diagnosis in 2007 and all kinds of suicide interventions and a whole pile of other things that all got kicked off. That that snowball started to get pushed down the hill at the age of 6 because of my brother, who had his own demons that he was dealing with. And he decided at the time that the best way to deal with it was by wandering down the hall to his 6-year-old brother's room. But it was weird how, we talked early on in this conversation about how how we look at other people and we assume various things about other people. And it came up in the interview that Oprah did with Meghan Markle last night. Again, sorry to keep going back to that, but it's what the world is talking about this morning.
Spoiler alert.
One of the things that came up in that interview was Meghan Markle talks about this idea of, and I've been an advocate of this for years, everybody's got something. So think about, like, I take it sometimes to the extreme when I think about everybody's got something. If somebody cuts me off in traffic, I got two options. I can flip them off and yell and scream and whatever else and road rage out, or I can take a second and entertain the possibility. And it's only a possibility, but it's every bit as much of a possibility as just looking at him and going, that person is obviously an asshole. Maybe they cut me off and the reason that they're driving like a maniac is because there's somebody in the back seat of the car that I can't see because they're lying down, because they're in labor, they've just been shot, something's going on with them, and the person driving is trying to get them to the hospital before they die. Maybe that's what's going on. I don't know, because I'm not having a conversation with that person, but maybe that's what's going on in the world. There's a great piece in a book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Stephen Covey, where Covey talks about a guy on the subway, and he's sitting there on the subway, and he's got his kids with him, and his kids are running around and causing a ruckus on the subway car, and all of these different things are going on, and people are looking at him and throwing shade, et cetera, et cetera. Until finally somebody says, hey, do you want to, corral your kids? They're getting out of hand and they're annoying people. And the guy just kind of goes, oh, yeah, sorry, I wasn't even paying attention. I'm sorry about that. They're burning off some steam. We just came from the hospital. Their mother just died. And they're just, I guess this is their way of coping. But you're right. I'm sorry to inconvenience you. And then suddenly everybody on the subway car who got annoyed at this guy feels like absolute shit because they had looked at this guy and judged he's a bad person because his kids are running around and he's not doing anything about it, instead of entertaining the idea that there might be other possibilities, there might be other things going on in this guy's life that are leading to various, and they have no idea what's going on. I'll take you a little further down my road. Some of the other things that led to, because it's difficult to envision a scenario where you go from, I got molested repeatedly starting in 1973, and then in 2007, I finally got diagnosed with PTSD. There were a number of steps along the way. So let me throw some fun ones into the conversation, just so that you get an idea that maybe when you're looking at that person over there, taking stuff into account. I had the hardest time ever trusting people. I didn't ever let people get very close to me. And then I realized why in 2007 when I was going through the recovery from the PTSD diagnosis. This happened to me twice, once when I was about 12 and once when I was about 17, where I was the class clown, right? I was the one that would always make sometimes inappropriate fun of things and be able to turn anything into a laugh. And I was always sort of on stage and entertaining people, blah, blah, blah. So in both cases, the scenario was sort of similar. At 12 years old, I was standing on the side of a pool and was pretending that I was being shot at from planes that were flying overhead. And so there I was, and I was trying to take out the planes, and one of them got me, right? And he shot me, and there I am, and my death scene, my 12-year-old death scene, I fall into the pool. Problem was, I couldn't swim. And we were at a neighbor's house, and I had never been to their pool before, and I didn't realize that I had fallen into the deep end in their pool. Morph that, and that story from that moment matches up with a story that happened 5 years later. I'm at a pool party at a friend's house from high school. And because I'm the clown and everybody thinks that I'm a funny guy and I can make jokes about anything, one of the guys from the football team picks me up and throws me into the pool, into the deep end. Nobody at the party knew that I couldn't swim. So both stories then from that point forward match up, and the same things happen in both cases. That's why I kind of pivoted when I did. In both cases, I'm flailing around in the pool, can't swim, can't breathe, and everybody around thinks, oh man, he is so funny. He's hilarious. Like, look at him doing that. That's funny stuff. And then I start sinking to the bottom of the pool in both cases. And in both cases, I can, as clear as if it happened 5 minutes ago, I remember the thought in my head, I'm about to die, and they're laughing at me. And that was another one of those things that got welded to my brain, was this perception that my death was, and my suffering was going to bring people joy, because listen to how much fun they're having watching me die. In both cases, miraculously, someone happened to come onto the scene who knew that I couldn't swim, knew that I was in trouble, jumped in and saved me. Different person in both times, but jumped in and saved me. But that message of people will take joy in your suffering stayed with me so far my entire life. And it's one of those things that is difficult. And the only reason I bring these stories up, and I've got more, like when I sat down with the therapist who started helping me work through all this stuff, he had an 8.5 by 14 legal pad, those yellow pads, and a Sharpie. And he was just kind of making bullet points. Okay, drowning incident. And that would be that. And then underneath it, he would write, molestation at 6. Blah, blah, blah. He wrote out 11 or 12 pages of my various traumas that had happened to me over the course of a lifetime. But like a dozen pages of these things in bullets. So, I mean, I can fill a second hour with all the other things, but I won't go there. The reason that I bring all that up is just one of those where it's like the thing I tell you about the driving around in traffic. Just because someone behaves in a way that isn't convenient for you in the moment, or is offensive or repugnant or whatever, there might be something that led to that you don't know about. And it also came up in that interview last night. They talk about how the moment where Meghan Markle went to Prince Harry and told him that she was having suicidal thoughts and she didn't want to be alive anymore. And they were supposed to go to an event that night. And he said, let me just go by myself because I don't think you should go. And she said, no, I have to go because it's unsafe for me to be alone right now. So they end up going to this very big, very posh, swanky public event where there's a million cameras and stuff. And you see the photos of them at that event. And one of the things Meghan Markle says to Oprah, she says, zoom in on the photo. Zoom in. You see that photo where we're smiling and laughing and blah, blah, blah coming out of the event? Zoom in on our hands. And she says, what you'll see if you zoom in on our hands is you'll see that Harry and I are holding hands and our knuckles are white. And the reason our knuckles are white is because we just had the conversation about me wanting to kill myself less than 8 hours before. And we are just doing everything we can to put on a happy face for the cameras and get on with the day and just get the hell out of there. And it's us holding hands to the point where our knuckles have turned white just so that we can go home. And the whole point of that whole conversation thing with Oprah was just like, just because somebody looks happy, looks like they're having fun, is able to put on happy faces for the cameras, for the microphones, for whatever, don't make the mistake of assuming that you know what's going on in their world or you know how their life is unfolding. There's probably stuff for every single one of the 7.5 billion people on the planet that you don't know about, that if you took the time to reach out and understand and give a shit, you might actually understand them better and make the world a better place.
I went to school for psychology, so you kind of learn that with studying all the cases that you have to kind of study, especially things that people are hiding. Same thing with my biggest hero, I would say, is Robin Williams. You know, how can someone goes, how can he be so depressed and take his own life? Well, you don't understand what's suffering under the surface. The people that smile the biggest tend to have the most issues that are going on. The ones that tend to reflect or project certain laughter.
Dude, I spent 8 years as a stand-up comic. Those are some of the most sad, depressed, messed up people you'll ever meet in your life are stand-up comics. Absolutely, no question about it. Look at Gary Gulman. I don't know if you've seen it. There's a great HBO documentary called The Great Depression. It's a comic named Gary Gulman, who he didn't win Last Comic Standing on NBC, but he was one of the finalists. Absolutely brilliantly hilarious, but his depression got to a point on stage one night where he broke down on stage, and he couldn't keep going the way he was going. And part of his recovery, when he recovered, he ended up talking about he turned his depression and his experiences with depression into part of his act. And the first few minutes that he's doing this new act that he's got that's all about depression, you can feel it, like the audience is like it's awkward, because they feel funny laughing about a guy talking about his depression. But then eventually, because Gary Gulman is a genius, he brings you in and you feel at the end of it like you understand and you get it and all these different things that are going on. It reminds me of a guy that I used to do stand up with, named Gord Painter. I don't know what Gord's doing now because I haven't talked to Gord in ages, but Gord is blind. And the very first thing Gord did every single night, you know, because you're in a bar, basically, you're in a comedy club where there's chairs and tables all over the place and a million things for him to bump into. So he has someone guide him to the stage at the beginning of every set. And it's part of the show where Gord will have the person lead him onto the stage facing the wrong way. and it's an early gag and blah, blah, blah. And at that moment, people are like, oh, I can't laugh at the blind guy. I can't. But then almost right away, Gord's got you laughing, and he's making you, he basically gets this message across that it's like, hey, I'm blind. I'm okay with it. You should be okay with it too. Because if I can laugh at this stuff, don't worry. It's okay for you to laugh at it as well. But there are, and Gord went on from his stand-up stuff to be a motivational speaker. And he is a rare exception, because there are so many comics that are out there that are cut from that Robin Williams cloth, that the reason that they do stand-up is because the bright light that's shining in their face while they're on the stage obscures their vision of having to look perhaps in a mirror and see things they don't want to see looking back at them.
Yeah. I don't know how to respond to that one. That's the question I didn't have an answer for with that one right there. No, but I really appreciate you confiding in me with that. I know that's very personal information. So
I know I'm breaking news for the first play. I mean, you think about all the stuff that I do, and I could have thrown this out there on national television about the identity of my molester, but I chose to do it with you.
Well, I've had my own experiences too. Something with my doctor. I made a joke about saying my doctor tried to get me into porn. It's a little bit darker story than I cracked it into a joke or whatever. But I understand where that comes from. It's where I can rationalize with what that feeling is also like, but also understanding psychology as well. Somebody I always talked about, at least probably when I was in episode 500, around that time, I was always talking about when you see somebody at a store with, cutting in front of line and just yelling and being outrageous to somebody, they probably have something going on in their life. And then you walk outside and you see them getting in a car and their car has a spare tire on it, probably because they got a flat. There's a lot more people aren't just always revved up to 10. It's something has led them there that they really can't. And just a sudden thing could spike where you're like, why the hell are you acting that crazy over Raisin Bran? It's like, what? It's probably something else deeper that goes down into that. And that's just the big message for people to try and understand is you really can't be poking holes at other people when you barely even know yourself, because a lot of the times you're dealing with something you don't even know that's stressing you out. I'm freaking
fun homework assignment.
Oh God, no homework.
Once you're done this video, or this podcast episode, Google a short film called This Is Water. I've forgotten the name of the speaker, but it basically takes audio from a commencement address that he did, and someone was inspired by the message and turned it into, I don't know, it's like an 8 or 9 minute film just called This Is Water. And it deals with exactly that idea that you're talking about, and kind of this road that we've been going down for the last little while, but it does it in a much more elegant and artful way than the drivel I've been pumping out for the last 22 minutes, where he gets into, I'll just, go Google it. This Is Water. Trust me, it's 8 or 9 minutes that will change your life.
I'm going to DuckDuckGo it because Google, I don't trust. But I appreciate you, Neil, for giving me your time today, man. We're almost heading up on that 2-hour mark. So do you want to promote where people can find your podcast, where people can find some of your work and be able to come across some of your content?
Okay, so a few things. If you're watching / listening to this in Canada, come hang out with me for 6 or 7 minutes every Saturday morning at around 20 after 9 on CTV News Channel, available everywhere, at least on the north side of the border. It's the 7 or 8 minutes that I get to spend every week that kept the hate tweets flowing for a long time until I finally got tired of the trolls and deleted my Twitter account. So there's that. Podcasts and other stuff. So the main one right now that's got most of my attention is called The Snooze Button. Easy to find, thesnoozebutton.com. There's also, if you want to look it up on your podcast app, there's the Snooze Button Express, which is all the juicy goodness of the snooze button compressed down to the 9 minutes you would get if you actually hit the snooze button on an alarm clock. So there's that. So Snooze Button and the Snooze Button Express season 2 starts March 29th. And season 2 is interesting because it's when we sit down and spend a whole mess of time with celebrities and high achievers and other people talking about, like one of the early episodes is with a Broadway star. And we talk about how she falls asleep the night before her show opens on Broadway, which is a fun conversation. And we'll get into all of that. The other one that I don't have a launch date for yet, simply because it turns out it's very production intensive, is called Schoolie School. It's SKOOLIE SKOOL, and schoolieschool.com is the very bare bones website right now that will follow the process where I convert a retired 40-foot school bus into a home for my family. And we do it by talking to people who actually know stuff. It's not going to be a scenario where I kind of fumble my way through the dark and try to teach myself how to weld. I'm going to talk to experts about every single step along the way, and get the smartest people I can find, kind of like the conversation we had before about politics, about wouldn't it be great if you could just get the smartest people and have them help figure out the best way forward. Well, that's what this project is going to be. It's the best and brightest from all over the world helping me figure out the best way to build this bus. But as you might imagine, there's a lot that goes into putting those episodes together. So I'm starting work on the bus today or tomorrow, actually. I don't know how long it's going to take for that to hit YouTube or the web, but it'll be soon. So those are the big things right now. And the Snooze Button, the book, will be out in time for Christmas. So there you go.
I'll make sure I link it all in the description, Neil. And thank you for giving me your time today. And thanks for everyone listening to this episode Out of the Blank.